People draw upon their memory every day, whether it's for work, school, remembering daily tasks, or just for fun. So what is memory? Kevin Arnold said, "Memory is a way to hold on to things that you love." In this lesson, we will go over how to increase attention, rehearse information, and code effectively so information can remain in your long-term memory. To understand how memories are formed, let's take a look at the following memory diagram. Our senses are under constant bombardment by external stimuli such as lights, sounds, and any other type of sensory stimulus. Though these stimuli are ever present, most of the sensory stimuli pass through our sensory storage only to be instantly forgotten unless conscious attention is paid to them. Giving attention to the external stimuli before us is essential to any piece of information forming a short-term memory in our minds. Short-term memory is a memory held for a very short time. It typically can only hold about 5 to 9 bits of information at any one moment before being cast out by new bits of information that are attended to. For this reason, most information entering short-term memory is only held onto for 20 to 30 seconds before being dismissed and forgotten. Rehearsal of the information until attended to is key to keeping information in one's short-term memory. A rule of thumb for rehearsing information is to rehearse at least 3 times. For example, if you were to look up a phone number for the local pizza delivery place and you were to find the number 356-9555, you might recite this number 3 times as you walk across the room to make a phone call. However, upon making the phone call, the number would most likely be quickly forgotten, unless it was a number that you were in the habit of calling on a regular basis. For information to be stored in our long-term memory, it must be coded in some way so that it can be retrieved later when needed. It's through the proper coding of information and the occasional retrieval of this information back into our short-term memory where it can be rehearsed that information is to remain accessible for long periods of time. From the memory method diagram, we learn that for any bit of information to become memorable, it must be attended to, and that most things are not attended to unless we are, physically and mentally at the same place at the same time, interested, motivated, wherein we see the value of something and have some expectation of success with the content, have a positive attitude, and an intention to remember. A few strategies that can help you be more attentive to your academics would be to give yourself a goal for focusing your attention for a predetermined period of time. Make sure that these goals are easy to accomplish. Reward yourself. Get interested in the project. Pre-read your readings. Establish a purpose. Combine physical and mental activities. Keep a distractions list. And build your attention span. When it comes to rehearsing information, the key to retaining information is all about the spaced review. In the late 1800s, Hermann Ebbinghaus, a German psychologist, performed a landmark study on forgetfulness. Ebbinghaus had subjects memorize a list of meaningless 3-letter words, and he tracked how quickly his subjects forgot the words after having first learned them. His findings, which became known as the Ebbinghaus, or forgetting curve, illustrates the necessity for immediate and spaced reviews for the material you are exposed to. This graph not only displays his original findings, but illustrates how quickly information you are exposed to can be forgotten. Notice that within 1 hour since exposure, your retention of the material drops to below 50%. So what exactly is the difference between reviewing immediately after class versus waiting to review? This next graph shows what would happen if you studied immediately after class by completing, organizing, and comprehending notes. Then again within 24 hours of class, through rereading notes, condensing to main ideas, and creating questions, then 1 week by reviewing and self-testing your recall, and finally 1 month later. These 4 review times are essential to overcoming the forgetting curve. Notice how much less is forgotten after each review. Beyond helping us remember, reviewing regularly keeps us from having to cram right before a test. Cramming is something we have all done, and perhaps have even done okay by using this method. However, here are some of the negative side effects of cramming. It is physically draining, mentally exhausting, time-consuming, minimal long-term retention, substantial input is required for minimal output. If you have ever crammed and found yourself unable to recall information that you thought you learned, it probably wasn't that you forgot, but that you just didn't make the conscious effort necessary to remember and put it into your long-term memory. As Daniel Hope put it, how can one forget that which was never learned? So, we have learned that it's important to perform immediate and spaced reviews versus trying to cram the material in. But is there a best way of going about performing these reviews? While each individual is unique in how they learn, here are a few suggestions. First, don't just passively read the material. Try saying it out loud in your own words or writing it down from memory. If you can't explain the material out loud in your own words, you probably don't know the material on the level needed to do well on the test. This truth is expressed in the following learning pyramid. Our brain retains only about 5% from the last lecture after 2 weeks and 10% of what we read. 20% is retained after an audio-visual, such as a PowerPoint presentation, and 30% from a demonstration. Discussion groups resolved in a 50% retention, while practicing by doing leads to a 75% retention. However, 90% of what you teach each other is remembered after 2 weeks. How many times have you found yourself simply reading to study? The difference of 80% makes teaching the material well worth the effort. This principle can be best summarized in Romans 2:21. Thou therefore which teachest another, teachest thou not thyself? Some of the problems that negatively affect successful memorization include 1. Not rehearsing adequately to transfer into long-term memory, 2. Not properly coding the material, and 3. There is a difficult time retrieving because of loss of access. Finally, perhaps the best way of retaining information long-term is to take a test over the material. Tom Bodett, founder of Motel 6, said, "The difference between college and life is that in college you are taught a lesson and then given a test. In life, you are given a test and then learn a lesson. Some of life's most powerful and memorable lessons come as a result of a test we are given. So why not do the same for our academics? Formulate possible test questions that might be asked on a test. Quiz yourself using these questions or have someone quiz you over the material. See if the instructor has former exams that you might possibly use to review for the exam. Let's take a look at how we can code or organize the material so that it sticks in our long-term memory. Coding effectively happens as we organize the material, make it personally meaningful, repeat material, use multiple sense modalities, visual imagery, engage in motor activity, and associate it with material already stored. One way of coding or organizing study materials is through the use of mnemonic devices. A mnemonic is practically any tool that helps you remember. One type of mnemonic is an acronym. An acronym takes the first letter of words, which one wishes to remember, and makes a new word. You might have used them before with examples such as CTR, or Choose the Right, LOL, or Laugh Out Loud, or NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Another mnemonic is an acrostic. An acrostic takes the first letter of a group of words or the word itself and makes a new sentence. Rhymes and songs can also be considered acrostics. In music, a common way to remember the letters associated with the treble clef are "Every good boy does fine." In math, you may have learned "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally" for the order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. The next mnemonic method is to link or chain items together to make some sort of memorable story. The weirder, wackier, or more colorful your story is, the better. Another mnemonic is location association, or the LOCI method, in which you think of a very familiar location and mentally place the items you want to remember in the picture. Associate each item you need to remember with existing objects. The final mnemonic is visualization, where you use colorful and vivid mental pictures to help you remember things. To review, in this lesson we have learned how to increase our attention, rehearse information, and code information. Congratulations! Now you are on your way for better review and memorization.